Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of textual study of the Quran. In our previous session, we had studied verses 23 to 35 of Surah Al-Nisa. We finished actually discussing and explaining these verses, and today we will look to their literal translation and also their idiomatic translation. And once we are through with this, inshallah, then we'll start off with verse 36 onwards. So we begin with this literal and idiomatic translation exercise. It says, Hurrimat alaykum ummahatukum wa banatukum wa akhawatukum. So hurrimat means made prohibited. Alaykum, on you. So they have been prohibited to you. And what are the things that are prohibited to you? They are stated next. So the first is ummahatukum. Ummahatukum means your mothers. Wa banatukum. So banat basically is the plural of bint, and banat, of course, is the plural of bint, and the singular is bint. So banatukum would mean your daughters. And wa akhawatukum, and akhawatukum, your sisters. Wa ammatukum. So ammatukum, these are your paternal aunts. Wa khalatukum, your maternal aunts. Wa banatul akh. So banatul akh would mean the daughters of your brother, which of course is a niece. And wa banatul ukht, daughters of your sister, also called a niece. Wa ummahatukum allati arda'nakum, and the mothers who have suckled you. So this of course refers to foster mothers. Wa akhawatukum min ar-rada'a, and your sisters who have come into being because of this relationship of fosterage. Wa ummahatu nisa'ikum, and your mother-in-laws. Basically, it means the mothers of your wives. وَرَبَائِبُكُمُ اللَّاتِي فِي هُجُورِكُم مِّن نِّسَائِكُمُ اللَّاتِي دَخَلْتُم بِهِنَّ. So, Rabaiba, of course, Rabaib is the plural of Rabiba, and it refers to stepdaughters. Stepdaughters who have been, fi hujurikum would mean in hujurikum, in your surveillance, in your guidance, min nisaikum, from your wives, allati, who, dakhaltum bihinna, you have had intercourse. So what is being said here is that stepdaughters that have been brought under you, hujur of course refers to one's lap, hijr is the one's lap, and of course referring to the fact that they have been raised under their guidance from their mothers. And if the mothers of those daughters, if the person has had sexual intercourse with them, then the daughters will also be forbidden to him. فَإِن لَمْ تَكُونُوا دَخَلْتُمْ بِهِنَّ. Therefore, if lam, not takunu, you, dakhaltum bihinna, have had intercourse, fala, therefore not, junaha, sin, alaykum, on you. So fa'in lam takunu would mean if you have not had intercourse with them, then there shall be no sin. In other words, stepdaughters with whose mothers you have not had intercourse, then such stepdaughters would be allowed for you for marriage. And then وَحَلَائِلُ أَبْنَائِكُمْ. So halila is the singular of halail and refers to wives. So halailu abnaikum would mean your daughter-in-law. Your daughters-in-law, of course, referring to the daughters or the wives of your real sons. Allazina min aslabikum. So this qualification of allazina min aslabikum refers to a person being a real son. Allazina min aslabikum would mean from your loins. So sulb, of course, is the loin, and aslab is its plural, and referring to the fact that sons that have been born from you. Wa, and an, that, tajma'u, you gather, bain al-ukhtain, between two sisters at the same time. Illa, except, ma, that, qad salaf, happened in the past. So clearly you can see this list has been enumerated in a very precise way, referring to the fact that the prohibition of relations for marriage is regarding your mothers, your sisters, your daughters and your sisters, and your paternal aunts, your maternal aunts, your nieces, whether they are from your brothers or from your sisters, and then women who have suckled you, and sisters who have become your foster sisters, and your mothers-in-law, and of course your stepdaughters that have been raised by you from women with whom you have had intercourse. But if you have not had intercourse with them, then such daughters-in-law would be allowed for you. There will be no sin for you to marry them. Well, halailu abnaikum, of course, refers to your these daughters-in-law. We had stepdaughters before, and now we have daughters-in-law. So Rabiba is basically stepdaughter, and Halila is wife. So Halila or halailu abnaikum would mean the wives of your real sons, because the words are min aslabikum. So all these are prohibited to you in marriage. And also prohibited is that you marry two sisters at the same time. And tajma'u bain al-ukhtayn. So you gather or you collect or you make two sisters in your wedlock at the same time. Illa ma qad salaf, except what has been done in the past. Inna Allah kana ghafoor rahima. Inna, indeed, Allah, God, kana is ghafoor, merciful, rahima, forgiving. So indeed, God is forgiving and merciful, referring to the fact that these relations have been prohibited in marriage. However, if people have indulged in them or made any, excesses in them, committed excesses in them, then at least from now onwards, they should observe them. And what has happened in the past has been will be forgiven by the Almighty, because the words are in Allah kana ghafur rahima, and what has happened in the past is something that, of course, cannot be changed. Wal muhsanatu. So the list is still continuing. Wal muhsanatu minan nisa'i illa ma malakat aymanukum, and also prohibited. Muhsanat means free women. Free amongst women, we can say. Al muhsanatu minan nisa'i. Of course, let me make this correction. Let me correct myself. The word muhsanat is not referring to free women. It is actually referring to married women. So wal muhsanatu minan nisa'i would mean women who are married. Illa, except ma, that malakat, they come in your aymanukum, in your possession, or they come in the possession of your right hand. This is the literal meaning. Ma, that malakat, come in the possession, aymanukum, your right hand. So ayman is the plural of yameen, and yameen means the right. So this expression of the Quran, malakat aymanukum, refers to the fact that they become subservient to you. In other words, women who are married, and for example, in those times, it was a custom that married women, if they would be caught in wars, and they would be then, if someone would like to marry them with their consent, then this would not in any way impede that marriage, because they would be already married to someone. So their marriage with a new person, if with their own consent, would be itself a declaration of annulment of their marriage with the previous person. So that is what is said here. Kitabullahi alaykum. Kitabullahi alaykum would mean the law of God on you. Literally, it would mean Kitab is the law, Allah is God, and alaykum on you. So remember, we have also discussed this, that the word Kitab is used in the Quran in several meanings. For example, it also means a book. It also means a letter. It also means law and has other usages as well. But here it means this is the law of God upon you. You have to obey it. وَأُحِلَّ لَكُمْ مَا وَرَاءَ ذَلِكُمْ. Wa, and uhilla, allowed, lakum, to you, ma wara'akum, ma wara'a zalikum, all that are except these. All that are except these, which means the ones that have been enumerated. An tabtahu, so that you seek them, bi amwalikum, with your wealth. Muhsinina. So muhsinina would mean not committing, such that they are kept chaste. Ghaira musafihina, and do not commit fornication in any way. So they are such that these women, that you acquire these women in a way that is lawful. And the word, when you see occurs here in relation to marriage, is amwal. And amwal, of course, is the plural of mal. It refers to dower, because the dower is paid in cash or in kind at that time. So the purpose is that if you marry anyone, you must consider this fact that you have to pay the dower. And the nature of this marriage should be that muhsinina, that you are chaste and you are not indulging in any sort of illegal marriage or illegal affair. فَمَسْتَمْتَعْتُمْ بِهِ مِنْهُنَّ. Therefore, ma, when istamta'tum. So istamta'tum basically would mean that you have benefited from them. When you have benefited from them, bihi, from them, through them, and fa'atuhunna ujurahunna. That would mean Fa'atu would mean therefore give them. Ujurahunna, their dower. So ujur is the plural of ajr, and fariza would mean as something that is a duty. So for mastamta'tum bihi minhunna would mean that when you have benefited from them, which means that when you have married them, and when you plan to marry them, and that plan has materialized, don't think that you will go scot-free. Your duty and obligation to pay their dower is an obligation. It's something that is mandatory upon you. It should not in any way be overlooked. And then it is said, "Wala junaha alaykum fima taradaytum bihi min ba'd al-farida." Wa and la not. Junaha sin alaykum on you. Fima in that taradaytum. So taradaytum would mean you mutually agree. Bihi on that thing. Min ba'd al-farida, after it has been made concumbent. Literally implying the fact that basically you have to pay the dower, and once you have paid the dower, if then after that your wife relents, or maybe she compromises and says, okay, I'll not take the whole of the dower, I can see that you are not in a position, so therefore I will reduce my demand. So something of this sort, if it happens, the Quran says that this is fine. There's no sin on you. فِيمَا تَرَاضَيْتُمْ بِهِ مِن بَعْدِ الْفَرِيضَةِ, which means that if you mutually agree to something, which is of course that something would be less than the actual dower, and the Quran says that there's no sin on you. But then this has to be through mutual consent. Your wife must agree to it. So, and then it is said, Inna Allah kana aliman hakima. Inna, indeed, Allah, God, kana is aliman, knowledgeable, hakima, wise. Indeed, God is knowledgeable and wise. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ مِنْكُمْ طَوْلًا أَنْ يَنْكِحَ الْمُحْصَنَاتِ الْمُؤْمِنَاتِ فَمِمَّا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ مِنْ فَتَيَاتِكُمُ الْمُؤْمِنَاتِ. Wa and man he, lam not. Yastate has the capacity. Minkum from among you. So he who among you does not have the capacity. Of course, the word taulan is also referring to the same thing as yastate, and that would collectively mean that any one of you who does not have the capacity. وَمَنْ يَسْتَطِعْ مِنْكُمْ طَوْلًا, and what capacity is it being referred to? أَنْ يَنْكِحَ الْمُحْصَنَاتِ الْمُؤْمِنَاتِ, that you wed free believing women. If any one of you does not have the capacity to wed free women, yankiha, wed, al-muhsanat, of course, referring to the fact that they are free, and al-mu'minat would mean that they are believing women. فَمِمَّا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ مِنْ فَتَيَاتِكَ الْمُؤْمِنَاتِ. Fa, therefore, mim, among them, ma malakat aymanukum, then those that your right hand possesses. Min, from among, fatayatikum. So fatayat is of course the plural of fatiyah, which means girls, and the plural is fatayat. And fatayatikum mu'minat would mean that your girls which are believing, they are in your possession and they are believing. And the fact is that you must know that Wallahu a'lamu bi imanikum, and God knows your faith. He knows, He has full knowledge of your belief. So what is being said here is that if someone, and remember this is something that belonged to those times because the institution of slavery was later on abolished, but during the time that it was enforced, the Quran says that any one of you who is not able to marry free women, he can go ahead and marry slave women. But the condition is that they must be chaste and very pious. And if you marry them, then that is fine. But this should be done if you are not in a position to marry, or maybe there is some constriction, maybe some restriction or some other thing that is hindering your marriage with free women. Then as a second option, you can even marry slave women. Wallahu a'lamu bi imanikum, and Allah knows your faith. Ba'dukum min ba'd, you are from one another. Ba'dukum, some of you from some. Literally it would mean, ba'dukum would mean some of you, min from, ba'd some. Some of you are from some. This is a literal meaning, but in actual fact, the idiomatic meaning is that you are from one another. In other words, you are from the same category, you are from the same species. So it should not be a cause of hindrance that if you're not being able to marry a woman and you are marrying a slave woman, then this you should think as if you are marrying someone inferior. This is not the case, because God has created everyone equal, whether the person is a slave or a free person or a master, whatever that position is, that is secondary to his or her position of being a human being. So then it is said, فَانْكِحُوهُنَّ بِإِذْنِ أَهْلِهِنَّ. فَانْكِحُوهُنَّ would mean therefore, فَانْكِحُوهُنَّ would mean therefore marry them. بِإِذْنِ, with the permission, أَهْلِهِنَّ, of their masters. Because when you marry slave women, of course, it could be the case that you're marrying someone else's slave. So it says that you must marry these slave women with the permission of their masters. وَآتُوهُنَّ, and آتُوهُنَّ, give them, ujurahunna, their meher, their dower, bil maruf, according to the custom. So this means that when you are marrying slave women, then remember, in this case also, the dower has to be paid. Don't think that if you're marrying slave women, then the dower must not be paid because you're doing something, maybe in your own mind, something of a lesser thing in status. No, this is not the case. All men and women are equal. So if you're marrying a slave woman, and even then you must pay the dower. And that dower must be fixed by the maruf, which means the custom of the society, muhsanatin, and in such that you remain chaste. Ghaira musafihatin. I mean, of course, now they are referring to be that these women that you marry, that these slave women that you marry, they must be pious, they must be chaste. Ghaira musafihatin, not being lustful. Wala muttakhizati akhdan, wa and la, not muttakhizat, taking akhdan, paramours, which means that they should neither be of lustful or lewd character, nor there should be people who, or women who have these paramours. Fa, therefore, iza, when, uhsinna, they are kept chaste. Fa, therefore, in, if, atayna bifahisha, they commit adultery or fornication. Fa, therefore, alayhinna, on them, nisfu, half, ma, from, ala, on, al-muhsanat, free women, min al-azab, from that punishment. So if they are kept chaste, which means that they are given this full protection of chastity in their by being a family member, but they still commit fornication, they still commit adultery. فَإِنْ أَتَيْنَ بِفَاحِشَةٍ فَعَلَيْهِنَّ, then upon them is half the punishment of free women. Which means, of course, we know from Surah Nur, the punishment of adultery for free women is 100 lashes. But for them, it is said that even if after being kept chaste, they still indulge in adultery, then because they were originally slave women and they had a past, and so they are given this concession that if they indulge in adultery, then their punishment will be lesser than free women because of the fact that they had a past and they had this dismal past in which they tried to come out of it, but they still would not be able to easily do so. So it would be it would be half that of the free women from amongst the punishment. Literally, it would mean, of course, referring to the fact that those 100 lashes would be the case with free women, but when this comes to slave women, if they indulge in adultery in spite of being kept chaste, being given family protection, even then they will just be given half the punishment which is liable for free women. Zalika, this, liman, for those, khashia, who fear, al-anata. So anata means getting entangled in sin, minkum, from among you. So in other words, what is being said is that this permission of marrying slave girls is only for those who think that they might get entangled in sin. In other words, who think that if they don't satisfy their sexual desire with someone, then they might engage in something which is unbecoming, and they might engage in extramarital relationships. So the Quran says that this should not be the case, and this concession or this permission to marry slave women is given to those men who think that they would not be able to control their sexual desire and they need to have a partner. So in such a case, this can be adopted. But then look what the Quran says next. It says, وَأَن تَصْبِرُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. Wa, and that tasbiru, you are patient, khairul lakum, it is better for you, which means that you should show restraint and you do not marry slave women, because in that case there is a chance that something untoward might happen, and you practice self-restraint, you show patience. The Quran says khairul lakum, it is better for you. Wallahu ghafurur rahim. Wa, and Allah, God, ghafur, forgiving, rahim, ever merciful, and God is forgiving and ever merciful. يريد الله ليبين لكم ويهديكم سنن الذين من قبلكم ويتوب عليكم والله عليم حكيم. So yuridu intends, Allah God intends, ليبين لكم, to make it clear to you. So God intends to make it clear to you. يريد الله ليبين لكم ويهديكم, and يهديكم, give you guidance. Sunan al-lazina min qablikum. Sunan, of course, is the plural of sunnah, referring to the path. So he gives guidance of the path of those al-lazina min qablikum, of those before you. So God intends to make it plain before you, of course, referring to the fact that he would like to make his revelations clear to you and something that is very understandable for people. And وَيَهْدِيَكُمْ, and he gives guidance. Sunan al-lazina min qablikum. He gives you guidance regarding the pathways that were chosen by the people before you. Allazina min qablikum, those who were before you. Wa, and yatuba alaykum. So yatuba alaykum, he accepts your repentance. He looks upon you with favor. And I've discussed this earlier on as well, that at times the nature of a word is such that its ascription to a different entity would change the meaning. So when we use the word taba, of course, taba means to repent. When this is used in the form of a human being, or the fact that it is ascribed to a human being, then of course it would mean repent. But when the same word is used for God, of course, God does not repent, or he is, it would be absurd to say that he repents, but in such a case, that meaning is that he accepts repentance. Similar is the case with the word shakir. The word shukr, when it comes for a human being, it would mean that he is grateful to God. But when the Quran says, Wallahu shakirun alim, that God is shakir, it does not mean that God expresses gratitude. It only means that he accepts gratitude. So this subtle point should remain in your consideration. So Wallahu alimun hakim, wa, and Allah God, alim, knowledgeable, hakim, wise, and God is knowledgeable and wise. Wallahu yuridu an yatuba alaykum, wa, and Allah God, yuridu, wants, an, that, yatuba alaykum, to show favor to you, wa, and yuridu, wants, allazina, those, wa yuridu allazina, and those, and who are those? Yattabi'una shahwat. So yattabi'una means who follow. Shahwat is the plural of shahwa and means desires. So those who follow their desires, what do they want? An, that, tamilu, you deviate, mailin azima, a great deviation. You deviate in a very great way. So what is being said is that وَيُرِيدُ الَّذِينَ يَتَّبِعُونَ الشَّهَوَاتِ, those who follow their desires, they want you to deviate in a very, very large extent. So in other words, what God wants you to do, and God wants to show his favor upon you, but those of you, or those of the people who are following their desires, on the other hand, they want to make you lose your path. Okay, I'm just taking a break here. I'm going to stop here for some time. And if you have any questions regarding what we have translated until now, please raise them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Bismillah, Ahmed, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saleem. So a quick question, where you mentioned that God has asked men to be patient as far as their, women are concerned. My question to you is, so like I asked earlier, is it a prerequisite that why are men constantly told to be patient? Why is there no verse in the Quran that tells women to be patient? So does God accept men to be sexually more promiscuous, or what is the deal? I don't get it.
Well, that's very interesting. And today, because of the fact that we are living in a world that has, in which a lot of notions that we have are because of the fact that things have gone, I would say, gone south, in a sense that earlier on we were witnessing a wave of oppression for women for several centuries. And in the 18th century, I would say, when Mary Wollstonecraft wrote her famous treatise, A Vindication of the Rights of Women, I think this was in the 1790s, that this whole wave and this whole movement of feminism started off. And of course, when we live in a movement that is a counter movement to something extreme, then of course it is quite natural that extremes, they breed extremes. So that is why at times we are not able to understand a lot of things from the Quran, because today we are living in a world in which feminism, I'm not against feminism, but the fact is that at times it goes against human nature, and it is unbridled, that it cannot be fully endorsed. Having said this in the background, what I'd like to say is that basically what the Quran is telling us here is that for a human being, I mean, if you look at human beings, if you look at, in general, if you look at men and women, then the difference between men and women, I mean, there are several differences, but one of the temperamental difference among men and women is that a man possesses this initiative to take the lead in expressing his sexual desire or trying to fulfill his sexual desire. It's not that women don't have that. It is just that they are more reticent. They're more controlling, and there are people, or there are women who would not take the initiative in the general sense, as you can see. And the way men and women are biologically made also, it also suits that, because someone who is going to take the initiative has to be someone who is going to be the controlling partner in a particular setup in which, of course, sexual intimacy is going to take place. So the nature of that biological phenomena, as you might understand, because I'm just speaking in a more nuanced way,
Right.
it's
Right.
difficult to go into more
Right.
details. But the way men have been created, it is said that they are the ones who take the initiative. So it is because of this taking of initiative that the Quran has said that when they marry women, then it's a chance that if they marry slave women, that they might get entangled in some problem or the other. But if they cannot control themselves, okay, fine, then they can go ahead and marry them. But it is better that they restrain themselves. So this is how I understand it, at least.
So then basically we do accept the fact or acknowledge the fact that men, that's why God has given men guidance, because they are predisposed to this. So that is part of the entire.
I think what we can say is that they are more active. They are more
Okay.
proactive. They take the initiative. It's like taking the initiative. It's not that the other gender does not take the initiative, but what we can say that if you start comparing the two in a general sample, men would be having that initiative in a more pronounced way.
So basically the creator, obviously he's created us, so he knows what the weaknesses of both the genders are. So he's
Of course.
addressing man because he understands that man needs to be addressed more than the woman does. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
But at the
Thank you so
same
much.
time, I mean, this is not correct at all instances. You see, when the issue of marriage comes along, at times the male gender is addressed. But on many occasions, the reason that the women are not addressed is that they are, I mean, automatically understood. And because of the fact that it's like a patriarchal society that in which the Quran was revealed, and I think still we are living in patriarchal societies mostly. So because mostly men are in governing positions, not only in the family, but outside of the family as well. So the Almighty has, I mean, not commented whether this is right or wrong. I mean, the issue whether
Right.
the patriarchal setup is right or wrong is besides the issue at hand. It has
Right.
accepted the patriarchal society the way it is and said that, well, this is how you should proceed.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Saleem.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Our next question asks, in verse 24, you translated the word muhsanat as married women, while in the next verse 25, you translated the same word as free women. What's the reason?
Correct. Yes, because the word muhsanat has both these nuances. It has both these meanings, and the context tells you which is being used where. So if you look at the word in the first instance, it has to be used as a word in which it is referring to free women, because the next clause tells us that if you're not able to marry women, then you can marry slave women. So what's the opposite of slave women? It's free women. So that is why, I mean, just the context itself tells us that which meaning is used. So the word muhsanat has in fact three meanings. It's not just two. So the two that we have seen here, one refers to the fact that someone who is married is called a muhsanat, and someone who is free, in opposite to being a slave, is also called muhsanat. And someone who is kept chaste, someone who has this protection of chastity also in herself, is also called muhsanat. So all these three words, all these three meanings have been used in this paragraph because of the context.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. I had a question too. In over here, we're going over marriage with slave women, right? In order
Right.
to protect themselves. But then
Mhm.
mu'minun in certain ma'arij, Allah says that you can, enter slave women as along with your
Mm.
wives. So like
Right.
why is marriage, or was it at first like they could enter them and then later
Mm.
Allah revealed that you should marry them, give them their dowers, and then he
No, both. In fact, you see what you can say that both these options were given. Either you can retain them as slave women, or you can go ahead and marry them. If you retain them as slave women and continue with your life the way it is, then of course it's all normalcy. But if you would like to take a step ahead and make them your wives, then that is also an option, because you see this would be another step in normalizing the institution of slavery, in doing away with slaves, because now once you marry a slave girl in a way, then she gets free as soon as you marry her, and at the same time her status is raised because now you're going to pay the dower. So in the Arabian society, when you would pay the dower to someone, that would make that woman a woman of substance, I would say, a woman who would be honored in the society. So this is like telling men that, well, this is something that you can do, and at the same time, if you do it, you will be elevating their status also, and maybe setting them free also.
Sorry, I'm a bit confused because when they say enter, it means like you can sleep with them, right? So if you can sleep with a slave woman without marrying her, why would you marry her? Since the point is to be able to control your sexual desire, right?
You see, that is what the Quran is actually specified here. That at times a person would want to keep someone, not just a person who's a person or the partner from whom you could satisfy your sexual desire, but also because of the fact that you would like some companionship from her. So for that companionship, the Quran is telling us that if you would like to marry some slave woman, because now you're not just satisfying your sexual urge, you're also, receiving her as a person in your home. So when the word antaspiru is used, of course, it primarily refers to controlling your sexual desire, but at the same time, it also tells you that you are also taking some risk, because you see, these slave women, they had a background, they had improper upbringing, they had a history of adultery, they had a history of being prostitutes also. So that is something which the Quran says that if you take this step and also ask for the companionship of someone with whom you will also have sexual intercourse, then this is something that could be challenging for you.
I see. Thank you very much. Akram Bhatti, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Walaikum assalam.
Sir, I need a clarification on this ayah when it says that you can marry the daughters of your wives
Yes.
if you have not slept with them. So if
Yes.
that means the daughters that came with her, with the
Yes. Yes.
from prior marriage of her, that you can
The
marry
previous
them.
marriage, yes, referring to your stepdaughters, which means that the woman that you married, she had that daughter from a previous husband.
You can marry that daughter.
If you have not had sexual intercourse with your wife,
But
that
now
wife.
she's married to you. She's
Yes,
married
if
to
she's
you.
married, if the wife is
You can
married to
sleep with
you,
her.
and if she's married to you and you slept with your wife, which is of course could be the second wife or the first wife, whatever is it, in that case, your daughter-in-law, which is born to your wife from a previous husband, would become prohibited. But if you have married someone and as yet you have not, consummated your marriage,
Yeah,
and
but
you,
okay. So
in
then you
that case,
can.
the Quran says, and without consummation, then yes, you can marry her. Of course, that would mean that you divorce the wife, her mother, and then marry her.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, yeah, that's what
Yes.
our confusion was, that if you're gonna stay married, then what difference does it
No.
make?
Of course, that would mean that you would divorce her and then marry the daughter.
Okay, I got you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Exactly.
Thank you. Rafia Khwaja, please go ahead.
Dr. Shehzad, one thing I want to understand is a man is allowed to marry 4 times. And in that society, the men married once, twice, 3, 4 times. Then why would they want to go and sleep with the slave girls? If the wife hasn't satisfied him, there's the second wife, there's the third, there's the fourth. But then they also
So,
want to sleep with
yeah,
slave girls.
I mean, remember, this is not something that began with Islam or that began with the revelation of the Quran. It was an age-old Arab custom. It was going on in the Arab society that they would have wives and they would have slave girls. So wives would have a status higher. They would be their companions. They would be, I mean, equal to them in their status. But slave women, of course, they were mostly caught in as prisoners of war or bought from various markets. So this was a custom that was going on in Arabia. So Islam actually wanted to eliminate that. So remember, we are not talking about something which Islam started, and it's something that it inherited actually. It was like a heritage that it had, it received from a previous society, and now it wanted to do away with this inhuman institution of slavery. So it started off with a gradual program of its eradication. So you have to view this whole situation in that scenario. Otherwise, nothing will make sense. So you see, this is basically, yes, go ahead.
But Dr. Shehzad, what happens if the slave girl gets pregnant? Then where is she? Would you marry her, or would you tell her to go and lose the child?
You will have children from her. You will have children from her, and those children, at times they would have rights, and at times they would not have rights. We know even from among our Khulafa, I think, if I'm not forgetting, the Caliph Harun Rashid was also born from a slave woman, or I think it was either Harun or Mamun, one of them. But this is how Arabs were. I mean, they had children from their wives, and they had children from their slave girls. For example, the Prophet himself, he had a child, a male child from Maria the Copt, who was given to her, gifted to her by the king of Egypt. So he had a child from her, and he also had children from Khadija. So Fatima, for example, was born to Khadija, and Ibrahim was born from Maria. So this was a very, I mean, regular, common custom. The only thing is that the rights of a child born out of a slave woman and born out of a free woman would be negotiated, and at times they would have equal rights. They would even receive inheritance. There's nothing against it in the Quran. And because of the fact that this institution was ultimately eradicated, then many of the laws that have been enacted, of course, they stand redundant, except for those people, of course, who still think that slavery is still an ongoing institution.
But Dr. Shehzad, Maria Qibtiyya had a lot of rights. Didn't the Prophet treated her like his wife and the child? Did he marry her?
Yes, of course. He did not marry her. He could not have married her because the Quran had stopped him from marrying any slave woman that was gifted to him. So what he did was he could have set her free. The only option that he had was to set her free. He could not have married her. But I think I've repeatedly explained this, that he did not set her free because he wanted to show people that as long as slave women are in your possession, then there is some model that you have to follow. And the Prophet actually exhibited that ultimate model in which he showed that how, in an exemplary way, you have to deal with your slave women. And as a person, he showed this, and virtually she had the same rights. I think virtually, not exactly or not really, not in real time, but virtually she was treated in a very high way. She was given a lot of respect, and she almost had the same rights. But this is the same case. It's almost had the same rights. She did not become his wife.
But he
So
treated her very well. He treated her, is it an example of how a prophet can treat a slave girl so well that she would not feel that she's below anybody?
So that is why he did not liberate her. That is why he did not set her free. So that someone could present this example that as long as slavery is still temporarily allowed until a certain period of time, so he could set an example for other Muslims that if you have to keep slaves in that interim period, then this is how you should keep them.
Thank you. That I understand it clearly. Thank you
very much. The next question asks, why aren't is there any particular logic why two sisters can't be married to the same person at the same time?
Right. So I think the logic has been revealed by the Quran itself. It says, "Innahu kana fahishatan wa maqta." It is something which is which violates the norms of shame. It's something that's shameless. It creates that it breaks that barrier between the two sisters. But when you're intimate with both in a separate way, even if it is in a separate way, it somehow is called fahisha. Fahisha means something which is indecent. So it's because of this indecency that the Quran says that just as you don't marry your mothers or your daughters or your sisters, you don't marry two sisters at the same time, because then that would be an act of indecency. Because now you can clearly see that the shame and the regard that the sisters would have for each other would get sacrificed.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Abdul Rahman, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saleem.
Sir,
Is there any specific reason why previous prophets did not abolish the institution of slavery, or previous scriptures, I would say? Does Quran
I
have
think
any answer on
if
this?
you read the Torah, if you read the Old Testament, you'll see that something very similar happened in the time of Moses also. So he also abolished slavery, and that was that a woman or a man could not be kept slave for more than 7 years. So the Torah or the Old Testament tells us that once those 7 years passed, then the person had to be set free. So in their own tribal times, this is how things were. But remember, this is something that occurred years and years ago. Moses, of course, lived centuries before the prophet. And because of that, the whole structure was in a certain way, built in a way that these people who would be given to your possession, they would be working for the household, they would be doing all sorts of chores. But in spite of that, as you can see from the Torah, this could not go beyond 7 years. So after on the 7th year, the Torah tells us that the slave had to be set free. But then, of course, gradually, when you come to Arabia, this custom took a very inhuman shape in which people would become lifelong slaves. Not only lifelong, but they would continue with generations. Their own families would be living like that. So this is something that specifically happened in Arabia. And that is why the prophet, I mean, when he was sent there, remember, there was no prophet from Ishmael. There was like 2,500 years before the prophet. So when the prophet came in Arabia, there was no other prophet before him in that land. So he had to do it.
Sir, just to follow up on this, was slavery present before Prophet Ibrahim as well?
That is something that we are not. Yes, of course, because we know from the Bible that there were slaves in the times of perhaps pre-Abrahamic times also. But from Abrahamic times, we are very sure that they were, because we find the mention of slavery in Abraham's times. Pre-Abrahamic times, we can make a guess. I think an educated guess would be that yes, they did exist, although they have not been reported in history.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Bisma, please go ahead.
So, Dr. Saleem, this is such a delicate topic. But, as Mariam mentioned and Rafia Khwaja, this is something very hard for, I'm not going to say liberal women, because liberal, modern, that's just a relative term. It's for thinking women. It's very hard to digest and explain it to the younger generation that men, especially when you're reading Surah Al-Nisa, it becomes very difficult to comprehend it as a woman, that men are allowed all these, it's like almost like they don't have a limit on them, and women are not even addressed as far as they're just referred to as the object in this whole thing. It's regardless, and it's just something very hard to comprehend. What is an easy way to just explain it? That because God has prohibited us from having alcohol, he has told us we can't murder. But as far as this is concerned, the sexual part has a very vague area around it for men. How does the one explain that to children or to oneself?
Can you pinpoint a question or maybe a verse that you think is something that is undermining women?
Men being allowed to marry 4 times, not asking the first wife, then them being allowed to.
Okay, let's take it one at a time. Let's do it one at a time. For example, this question of marrying.
Marrying 4 women, marrying 4 women, or even So
okay,
why?
let me first explain this, or try to explain this. You see, I think I've explained this earlier also, but I'll do it again. That marrying 4 wives, I mean, women would have been allowed to marry 4 husbands as well, had they been given the status of the head of the family. You see, the thing is that the structure of the family, which is envisaged by Islam, is the one in which there is the head of the family, The head could have been the woman, or it could have been the husband, either the wife or the husband. But Islam said it should be the husband because of certain reasons that it stated. So had women been given this concession or permission, you can call it, to marry four husbands, she would have been living as a wife to four husbands. In other words, she would be facing four heads of the family, and she would have had a miserable life, because it's like being governed by four different people at the same time. If you look at our structure today, you cannot hold yourself accountable to four CEOs of the same sort at the same time. So you see, because of the fact that husbands are the head of the family, and the head can only be one, you cannot have four heads to a family. However, if women had been made the head of the family for some reason, then of course they would have been allowed to marry four husbands. So remember, this is not a gender-specific issue. It has been made a gender-specific issue. It's a specific issue related to the responsibilities of a head. Whoever is the head is given this prerogative. Had women been the head, they would have been given this prerogative, because now, being the head, a husband was answerable to a woman, and there could be multiple husbands answerable to the same woman. But in the case of a husband being a head, and now if you allow a woman to have several husbands, then she would be living again in four different institutions and four different families, and the same family, she would be facing four heads of the family. So that is why it is not allowed. So I think that we first need to understand that this is not a gender issue. It's more of an administrative issue.
Okay. And then what about the slave women? Women have been given no, allowance if it was like
Again,
Bibi Khadija was a
let
rich
me-
woman.
So let me explain this to you, and I think I just did as well, that slavery is something which Islam never started. The Quran never started. It inherited slavery. Women slaves were there, and they were there in scores and scores of numbers. What Islam did was it only adopted a gradual methodology of doing away with this institution. It made this appeal, fakku rakaba, release the necks of people. It's a very emotional appeal. It tells you as if your necks are in fetters and yokes. And it started off by telling them that you must raise the standard of living. Do not call them your slaves. Give them what you yourself eat and consume and wear. And similarly, many other reforms which I have discussed elsewhere were made so that gradually this perception about slavery should be eradicated. The Prophet even had his his son who was freed as a slave, Zayd ibn Harisa, married to his cousin Zainab bint Jahash, so that this would eliminate this taboo of slavery. And what happened? The marriage unfortunately failed, and Zayd ended up divorcing Zainab. So remember, the Prophet went to this length, that he wanted to make this slavery, remove the taboo from that slavery culture, and he had Zayd ibn Harisa, who was a born slave. He was liberated then, of course, later on, and he had him married to his cousin. But it didn't work out. You see, the dynamics of the society must be understood in more depth, how these work. It's like saying that, I'm just going to give you another example, that if you would like to, for example, resolve the issue of a red light area, which is found in so many cities, and one of the suggestions that has come forth from many people is that let them come and in the society and try your men that they start marrying these prostitutes. And you know what happened whenever this measure was taken? It failed miserably, because what happens is that you can do something out of emotion, out of kindness, but it does not last long, because now suddenly people start hearing these these taunts that he's married to a prostitute, or that his mother-in-law was also a prostitute, etc., etc., and it becomes too much for a person. So a person who might do it out of kindness ends up actually breaking it up. So you see, the
Right.
dynamics of society deals with your mentality. And that mentality, unless it is changed entirely in the society, if you do bits and pieces, you do some patchwork, it's not going to in any way succeed. Let me give you another example, the example of jahez or dowry. Dower. Dower is meher and dowry is jahez. Today, you might insist that women should not be given jahez, and you can go forth with that. But look how a custom has become so rampant that today women and girls, they pass their marriageable age simply because they cannot afford that dowry. We have been unable to change the minds of people that it is not the dowry which counts, it's the woman that you're bringing home, the girl that you're bringing home that should be concentrated upon. So this mentality is still here. So you see this mentality of people which is in the society, the Quran and of all the people, of all the beings almighty, is much more cognizant with our fitrat, with our nature. And
Right.
that's why the Quran does not take such drastic steps. It could have done so in the wink of an eye, would have just said that, okay, from now on, slavery is abolished. But that would have just been overturned. Because you see, the Quran is not working with angels or with people who are so pious, it's working with human beings. And human beings have perceptions.
Right. So, but that's exactly what the point I'm trying to make, Dr. Saleem, that like women in that time, like somebody like Bibi Khatija, who was wealthy, who was a businesswoman, women have not been given instructions that they should not be sleeping with their slave men. Because I'm sure that at that time, women who like men who were rich, there was somebody like Bibi Khatija, who was a businesswoman who was supposed to be wealthy. So she must have had slave men as well, but no instructions were given for women. So which means that
Okay, hold on. Let me explain this to you.
right.
In centuries of slavery, it
Right.
was an established custom that while a master could have a mistress, a master
Right.
could have a slave woman or a concubine, the reverse
Right.
was never the case. Women,
Okay.
even if they had slaves, they never slept with them. This was an established norm.
Okay.
It never happened actually. So that is
Okay.
why no instruction needed to be given to them.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Saleem. So, okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Noshad Shafkat, please go ahead.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Sahab. Dr. Sahab, wouldn't allowing women to have more than a single husband also raise issues of paternity with regard to the child that they conceive?
Yeah.
And
So let me
exemption,
answer this question first. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, go ahead,
So you
sir.
see,
Go ahead.
okay, paternity was formerly a question, but today with the invention of DNA tests and a lot of other instruments, we can now easily determine the paternity of a child, even if they are multiple partners of a woman. So that is something that might have worked maybe 50 years ago, but today, I mean, you can easily, that is why I did not bring it up. Otherwise, of course, had this been the case, had this question been asked some years ago when this DNA test was not available, I would have also argued in favor of this, that the paternity of the child is also in question. But today,
sir,
this
even
has been resolved.
there are many parts of society which don't accept these tests. There's a large majority, I think, in the subcontinent who wouldn't be willing to accept this test. And the other part of my question was that
yes,
4 wives was allowed only, I believe, in certain circumstances. That when the Muslim men were slaughtered in battle and women were left as widows, it was then that this permission was granted to men to marry them. And that is why they were allowed to have more than one wife.
So I think when I spoke on this subject at length, when we discussed this issue of polygamy in the beginning of Surah Al-Nisa, I did explain that this is not the case actually. The Quran has actually said that multiple marriages is something that went on in Arabia before the Quran was revealed. It was already in vogue. So the Quran said that you marry for a number of reasons. Now that these two battles have been fought of Badr and Uhud, and a lot of women have become widows and a lot of children have become orphans, so when you marry for other reasons, make this also one reason that you marry for the support of these orphans or these widows. So this is how the purpose of the Quran is, that it's not that it allowed women for the first time or men for the first time to marry 4 wives. If that was the case, then you were absolutely right. It was already rampant. People were already marrying for various reasons. So the Quran said, you marry for various reasons. Let this also be a reason that you marry to support these widows and these orphans.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rafia Khwaja, please go ahead.
Dr. Shehzad, would you confirm that slavery was finally abolished in 1968? Is that correct?
I think it was before that. I'm not sure about the date, but that can be checked.
But it wasn't abolished during the time of the Khulafai Rashidin. So
No.
it was much later on the
Much
pressure
later.
by
I mean,
the
in the last century. It was in
Europeans.
the last century, actually.
I see. So it went on all those years.
All those years.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was it for all the questions related to
Okay.
this topic so far. Yeah.
So I'm just going to finish off the literal translation that a part of it still remains, and this is from verse 29 onwards. So, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu la ta'kulu amwalakum bainakum bil batil illa an takuna tijaratan an taradim minkum. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu, O those who believe, la not ta'kulu, devour or consume, amwalakum, your wealth, bainakum, between amongst yourselves, bil batil, through unjust means, illa, except, if takuna, it is tijaratan, trading, an, from, taradim minkum, mutual consent, in a way that you do something out of mutual consent and you're not unjust. So idiomatically it would mean that believers do not devour the wealth of one another through unjust means, except it is through trading, and that too through mutual consent. And then it is said, wala taqtulu anfusakum, wa and la not. Taqtulu, kill. Anfusakum, yourselves. Of course, referring to the fact that you're killing one another. The anfusakum should not be in any way mean that you're referring to suicide, as has been understood by many people. It is a very common style of the Quran when it says, la taqtulu anfusakum, that do not kill yourselves, is the literal meaning. It actually means killing people amongst yourselves. Inna Allah kana bikum rahima. Inna, indeed, Allah, God, kana, is bikum, towards you, rahima, merciful. And God is merciful towards you. وَمَنْ يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ udwana. Wa, and man, he, yaf'al, does, zalika, this. And he who does this, udwana. So udwana is injustice. Wa, and zulman, and oppression. So he who does this with injustice and oppression, fasawfa nuslihi nara. Fasawfa would mean fa, therefore sawfa, very soon. Nuslihi, we will make him enter. Nara, the fire. So we shall make him enter the fire. So he who does this because of oppression and injustice, we will make him enter the fire. Wa kana zalika ala Allah yasira. Wa, and kana, is zalika, on this. Ala, Allah, sorry, let me do it again. Wa, and kana, is zalika, on this, alallahi, on God, yasira, easy. And this is something which is easy for God. This is something which is easy for God. If tajtanibu, you abstain, kabaira, from the grievous sins, ma tunhauna anhu, that you have been forbidden, nukaffir ankum sayyi'atikum. Nukaffir ankum would mean we will delete, or we will erase, ankum, from you, sayyi'atikum, your sins. Wa, and nudkhilkum, make you enter, mudkhalan karima, a place of prestige. Mudkhalan karima, a place of prestige. So if you abstain from their major sins, we shall erase your minor sins. In other words, if you know what, in the Quran we have this distinction of a major and a minor sin. And if you look at Surah Furqan, it gives a list of major sins, and these are three: polytheism, murder, and adultery. So these are three major sins. So Quran says if you abstain yourselves from these major sins, then God, if you relent and if you are truly penitent, then God will brush off these small sins from you. And then it is said, وَنُدْخِلْكُمْ مُدْخَلًا كَرِيمًا, and he will make you enter a place of honor. وَلَا تَتَمَنَّوْا مَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بِهِ بَعْدَكُمْ عَلَى بَعْدٍ. Wa, and la, not. تَتَمَنَّوْا, you should wish, ma, that, فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ, God has given superiority, bihi, through it, ba'dakum ala ba'd, some of you on the others. You should not desire what God has given superiority through which, some of you over the others. This is literally how the verse is telling us. But of course, idiomatically, it would mean that do not wish those things, do not desire those things in which God has given some of you more superiority or more preference than the others. لِلرِّجَالِ نَصِيبٌ مِّمَّا اكْتَسَبُوا. Rijal, of course, is the plural of rajul, and it refers to men. Nasib means share. Mimma, from what iktasabu, they have earned. So lirijali nasibu mimma iktasabu would mean that whatever men have earned, it is they have a share from it. They shall get its share. Lirijali nasibum mimma iktasabu would mean whatever men have earned, they shall get its share. Walin nisai nasibum mimma iktasabna, and whatever women have earned, they shall get a share from it as well. Was'alullaha min fazlihi. Was'alu, ask. Wa, and is'alu, ask. And ask Allah, God, min, from fazlihi, his blessings. And ask God from his blessings. Of course, referring to the fact that ask him his blessings. Inna Allah kana bikulli shay'in alima. Inna, indeed, Allah, God, kana is bikulli, over everything. Shay'in, in thing. Alima, knowledgeable. So God has knowledge over everything, which means that God is fully aware of everything. Wa, and likullin, for every. Ja'alna mawaliya. So walikullin ja'alna would mean that we have appointed heirs for everyone. Mimma tarakal walidan, that which has been left over by the parents and by the relatives. So in other words, it would mean that we have prescribed heirs for all. Mimma tarakal walidan, what has been left in the wealth, which has been left, of course, left over by the parents and by the relatives. Wallazina aqadat aymanukum fa'atuhum nasibahum. Wallazina, and those who aqadat aymanukum, you have made promises. Fa'atuhum, so therefore give them. Nasibahum, their share. In other words, if you have made some promises to people regarding your wealth, at this time you should honor your promises. Inna Allah kana ala kulli shay'in shahida. Inna, indeed, Allah, God, kana is ala, on, kulli, every, shay, thing, shahida, witness. Indeed, God is a witness of all things. He's watching all things. Inna Allah kana ala kulli shay'in shahida. الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض. الرجال, of course, the word is men here, but in the context we know that it refers to husbands. الرجال قوامون على النساء would mean that husbands have been made qawwam over their wives. Qawwam, qawwamuna ala is like an expression that can be translated as the heads of the women. In other words, they are the heads of the family. Literally, it would mean that they have been made in charge of women, or they have been made in charge of wives. So a husband is in charge of his wife. What does that mean? That he is responsible for her. And why is that? And that is stated right next to it. Bima faddalallahu ba'dahum ala ba'd. Because God has given one more preference over the other. In other words, there is something innately more appropriate for husbands to become the head of the family, because temperamentally, physically, psychologically, they are more suited to this task in general. This is the first reason. And then it is said, وَبِمَا أَنْفَقُوا مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ. Wa, and bima, because anfaqu, they spend, min amwalihim, from their wealth. So now it is said that men or husbands have been made in charge of a family. They are the head of the family on account of two reasons. The first reason is that they are temperamentally, psychologically, emotionally, and various other ways, they are more suited to this task in general. وَبِمَا أَنْفَقُوا مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ. And because they spend their wealth, which means that they are the heads of the family and they are liable to spend on the family. So they are to support their family, which means their wives, their children, they have to be supported by husbands. This does not mean that a wife cannot earn, that she cannot become a professional. It actually means that whether the wife is earning or not, it is the responsibility of the husband to always support the family. If the wife is earning, if she's an earning hand, it is fine. If she would like to contribute in the expenses of a household, it's her sweet wish. But if she says that she's not in a position, or she would like to save up that money for some other reason that she's earning, she cannot be in any way asked to contribute in the finances of the society, of the family. So these two reasons, that a husband is more suitable, and the fact that he is the head of the he is basically the breadwinner of the family. These two reasons are the reasons that have made husband the head, according to the Quran. And then next thing says, فَالصَّالِحَاتُ قَانِتَاتٌ حَافِظَاتٌ لِلْغَيْبِ. Fa, therefore, as-salihat, pious women, qanitatun, obedient, hafizatun lil ghaib, they guard secrets, bima hafizallah, because God guards secrets, or God guarded secrets. So pious women are those who are compliant to their husbands, they guard their secrets because God guards secrets. Wa, and allati, those women, takhafuna, you fear, nushuzahunna, that they will be rebellious. So those women about whom you fear that they might become rebellious, fa'izuhunna. Izuhunna, counsel them. Wa, then, uhjuruhunna, leave them to themselves in their beds. Fil mazaje, for mazja means bed, mazaje is beds, which means that just leave them alone, just separate from them. And after that, the next step is wadribuhunna. And if these two steps are not in any way, they are not in any way useful, then you can go to the third step. You can go to the third step, and that third step is that you can strike them. So idribuhunna actually means that you can punish them. فَإِنْ أَطَعْنَكُمْ فَلَا تَبْغُوا عَلَيْهِنَّ سَبِيلًا. Therefore, if أَطَعْنَكُمْ, they become obedient. فَلَا, therefore not. تَبْغُوا, find. عَلَيْهِنَّ, against them. Sabila, any way. So if they become obedient to you after these steps, then don't find a way to blame them in any way. Inna Allah kana aliyan kabira. Inna, indeed, Allah, God, kana is aliyan. Aliyan means exalted. Kabira, mighty. Indeed, God is exalted and mighty. Wa, and in, if, khiftum, you fear, shiqaqa baynihima. Shiqaqa means dissent. Baynihima, between the two. Now it is, the sense is that now the society also fears that the husband and the wife are about to divorce, and there's nothing that can stop them. The Quran says then another step should be taken. And what is that? Fab'asu, appoint, hakaman, a guarantor or an arbitrator, min ahlihi, from among the family of the husband. So if you fear that now they are going to break up, appoint a hakam, appoint an arbitrator from his family, and another arbitrator, hakamam min ahliha, from her family. So appoint an arbitrator, one from the wife's family and one from the husband's family. In yurida islahin yufawwiqillahu baynahuma. In yurida, if both of them intend islahin, reform, yuwaffiqillahu baynahuma, God will make them reconcile with one another. If both of them desire that they should stand reconciled, then God will create that harmony between them. Inna Allah kana aliman khabira. Inna, indeed, Allah, God, kana is aliman, knowledgeable, khabira, also is knowledgeable. Of course, you can translate it in a different way, that he's acquainted with matters. So indeed, God is knowledgeable and acquainted with matters. So this brings us to an end to today's text that we are going to literally translate. I'm not going to start a new section. If you have any questions regarding today's session, we can attempt them. And then, of course, in the last 10 minutes, we can also take off-topic questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. I'm waiting for questions regarding the topic. Akram Bhatti, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Sir, आपने कहा कि where it says वला तक़्तुलू अनफुसकुम, it is not about suicide. Is there another ayah in Quran where Allah says suicide is illegal or not allowed?
I mean, there is no such verse in the Quran which says suicide is illegal. The Quran says murder is illegal or not allowed. And murder can be of two types. You can murder someone else and you can murder yourself. So murder is a murder. So the Quran did not need to specify the nature of the murder. Both are forms of murder. Either you murder yourself or someone else.
So this could be interpreted by both of them, like taqtulu anfusakum, do not kill yourself or kill anybody. No?
It actually means do not kill anyone else.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Bisma, please go ahead.
So, Dr. Saleem, if suicide is also murder, then in current society, suicide almost is a form where people have a lot of sympathy for the person who kills themselves, while as murder, of course, it um, gives rise to different sentiments. Are we to assume that God looked at both the same way, and it is our misinterpretation that we're being sympathetic to people who commit suicide?
So I think this goes both ways. When normal murders are committed, and for example, it could be out of rage, it could be whether someone has been, he has seen something in which maybe his own daughter or mother, or maybe someone else was being molested or something, and he ended up killing that person. You see, so just as that murder would be treated leniently, similarly, if you murder your own self, and you might have a justifiable reason, that could also be treated leniently by God. For example, it could be the fact that that you have been raped yourself, and I've seen this happen to some women, that they committed suicide because they were repeatedly raped by some individual of the family or someone that they knew, and they could not
Okay.
just face the family. So see, there could be some justifications for suicide. I'm not saying that it's justified. I can just say that just as God may relent at some murders, similarly, there could be some concession regarding some cases of suicide as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ruhi Rasul, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Sir, this particular line confuses me a bit. Fasalihate kanitate
Yes.
kanitatu hafizatu. And it goes all the way where the husband punishes the wife by not sharing his bed with her, and other ways as well. So why such virtues are not mentioned here for men? That if they are not saleh or qanitun or hafizun or whatever these values are, virtues are, how the husband, a woman or wife, should be punished, or
I get your point.
because
I get your
because
point. Let me try to explain it. You see, the family setup is being discussed here. And in a family setup, if there is some form of rebellion, it will disrupt the setup. That disruption can only come from someone who is subservient in certain matters to the head. So that is why women are especially discussed here. You see, the thing that is being discussed here is that a family is going along smoothly, and decisions are being made, and it is progressing in a normal way. But one fine day, a wife decides that I'm not going to accept the authority of the husband whenever there is a difference of opinion. So remember, we have discussed this in detail, that this compliance by the wife is not something that has to be made in normal circumstances. This is especially when the issue is that when the husband is asserting his authority, there is a deadlock in a certain matter, and now how can we proceed? Because both of them are equally adamant. So one has to proceed. So the Quran says that the casting vote or the final vote is given to the person who is the head of the family, and because he is the husband, so therefore his opinion would prevail, even if it is wrong, because there has to be something to resolve the situation of deadlock. So in this situation, the Quran says that if that deadlock cannot be resolved, then the wives should be showing that compliant behavior to accept the opinion of the husband. But if they start showing issues, which means that they disrupt the family, then in order to protect the family from breaking up, this is what the husband should do. So you see, you need to follow the whole scenario, the whole context, that the issue of the family is being discussed. Now the family has to function in a proper way. And one of the things that can cause disruption is the wife standing up in opposition to the husband and telling him that I am from today the head of the family. You have to obey me. So the Quran says that this is going to disrupt the family setup. There can only be one head of the family, not two heads. So you counsel your wife, tell your wife that this is not the right way. The next step is that you should just separate between yourself and herself in intimate matters. And if both these measures don't work, then you can also adopt a third step. And we've discussed this the last time, that this third step is just an option. It's not an obligation. It's not anything that is a recommendation even. It is just an option given to you, because at times when you use force, when you punish people for their insolence, then they tend to give up their insolence. So if a husband estimates that this insolence could be controlled because of a punitive measure, then he can go as far as punishing his wife. That is how this whole flow is. And I think, again, I would request you to not view this from the lens of feminism, because that would create a lot of problem. The Quran is actually accepting the fact that husbands are a natural choice for becoming the heads of the family. And if this is the case, then the family must not come under any form of disruption. So it is trying to save the family from being dismembered or being disrupted.
So it means that the woman has no choice to show her anger or her displeasure.
Why not?
About her husband.
She can show her displeasure. She can show her dissent. She can tell the husband that, okay, I mean, for the sake of the fact that we have to resolve the matter, I'm going to accept your decision, but I'm not fully agreeing with you. I'm just doing it for this cause. I'm going to express my displeasure. That she can, of course, can do. And if she thinks that this is too much for her, and the husband is taking undue advantage of his authority, I mean, before even these steps can start, she can ask for a divorce. She can always separate her ways also. Because you see, if they are going to end up in a way that the whole family would be in disarray, and this whole practice is going to come to nothing, then if she walks out, I mean, she would be justified also.
It means that she doesn't have a choice, and if she refuses to sleep with him, if he asks her.
Let me rephrase it. Does a citizen of a country have the choice to disobey the law of that country? I mean, it's not a question of choice, it's your obligation. When I say that I don't have a choice to disobey the constitution of my country, I think it would be an absurd sentence, because constitutions are meant to be obeyed. You see, first you have to understand that the Quran is talking on a premise, and that premise is that the husband is the head of the family, and as the head of the family, if there is to be discipline, then whenever there comes this issue of deadlock, remember, this is not something of a rampant nature that every now and then you start discussing and you say that, well, if I have a different opinion, you have a different opinion, then I must always follow your opinion. So this is not a normal situation that the Quran is discussing. The Quran is discussing nushuz, which means that now the wife is challenging the husband and telling him that whenever there is a deadlock, my opinion is going to prevail. This in no way undermines her authority, that she cannot differ with the husband, she cannot have her own personality, she cannot tell her husband that the husband is incorrect in her view. All these things can happen. She can always convey that displeasure. The only thing is that whenever there is a deadlock, what does that mean? I've explained it in our last session, that both the husband and wife, about a particular view, they have their own very strong opinions in which they would like to remain adamant. Now, what should be done? Both are equally correct, maybe. So one has to adopt one opinion. So the Quran says, as a practical measure, don't see whether something is right and wrong. Just see it as a means of resolving a situation. The Quran says, because the husband is the head of the family, he is responsible for the finances. So therefore, if there is a deadlock, then the husband's opinion should be given a priority. That is what the Quran is telling us. It's not telling us about an everyday affair. It's referring to a very specific situation, which is called nushuz, which means that now the wife is standing in rebellion, and she's saying that, no, I'm not going to accept your authority in cases of deadlock.
So perhaps that's why the men have started working, and they have started earning their own sum.
Women.
So that the women, yes.
Well,
This
that
may
does
be
not
one of
change.
the
I mean,
reasons.
that does not change the issue. I mean, unless there is an agreement amongst the spouses at the time of marriage, which tells them that, well, in our marriage, I'm not going to be the head of the family, you're going to be the head of the family, and I'm going to bear the expenses for life. You remember, this is an appointment made by the Quran for life, that a husband, as long as they are married, for life, he is liable to earn for the wife. So now if they want a new agreement, then of course the Quran says that, okay, sit down and make a new agreement. If you think that you have to share the expenses equally, what should be the formula? If the divorce is to be sought, then who's going to divorce who? Because now both are on equal footings. And if at the time of marriage, there is this issue of meher, then of course, if you're not the head of the family, then the woman is the head of the family, then she would be giving the meher instead of the husband. So if you are going to change the whole setup, then everything is going to change. And if it is going to change, then it should be done in a way that you know what's going on.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Since we're closing into the end of the session, I would like to request all the participants to please keep their questions very concise. We'll take 2 questions from the chat because they're both related to the topic, and then we'll move on to the non-topic related questions. So this one asks, does daraba in Quran always refer to striking and not punishment?
That's a very good question. If you pick up an Arabic lexicon, you'll see that wherever the word zaraba is used for a human being, I mean, when the grammatical object is a human being, it always refers to strike, to hit. But when this is not the case, then there are a number of other meanings as well. For example, zarab al-amsal would mean that God actually tells you to state examples. Zarab al-masal, if you've seen Arabic, you know that in Arabic, zarab al-masal actually means to state some examples, to state proverbs, to communicate them. But whenever the word zaraba, the object, the grammatical object, the maf'ul, as you say, whenever the maf'ul is a rajul or is a human being, then it always means to strike. That is what dictionaries also tell us. And I think that the people who have interpreted the word wadribuhuna in a different way, it is because of their lack of understanding of how lexicons work. So you see, if you pick up, for example, Misbah al-Lughat, a very famous lughat of Arabic to Urdu, it will always specify that the word zaraba, whenever it is used as a verb acting upon an object which is a human being, then if that object is always a human being, I mean, it could have been something, it could have been some matter, all these are options to become an object, a grammatical object. But whenever the grammatical object is a person, then the word zaraba always means to strike or to hit.
Thank you very much. The next question asks, in verse 29, the unjust consumption of wealth and killing of one another are mentioned at the same time. What is the logic behind this?
Let me take out the verse. What's the number?
29.
Okay. So yes, this is verse 29. It says, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu la ta'kulu amwalakum bainakum bil batil illa an takuna tijaratan an taradim minkum wa la taqtulu anfusakum. So you see, what is being mentioned here is something which is unjust. And there are 2 things that are very dear to us. One is our wealth and the other is our person or our own life. So it is said that the wealth should not be consumed unjustly and life should not be taken unjustly. So when you kill someone, you're killing someone unjustly. So basically it is that the same injustice that is actually acting on the second part as well, that you are devouring the wealth of someone and you're also devouring the life of someone. It's like that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Salman Aziz, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Sir, the good wife keeps the secrets of the husband intact from others. Could you please define that? What are those secrets? Because referring to a previous question that 2 sisters should not be made together in marriage. Many of the news about marriage, even the marriage is consummated or not, is traveled between the women. So what is the definition of these secrets that the Quran is talking about?
I think this is just a common sense statement of the Quran, which tells us that secrets which are intimate, which are between the husband and wife, they should not be exposed in public. Of course, a wife knows the husband inside out. She knows her shortcomings. She knows his shortcomings. She knows his misdemeanor wherever he falls short. I mean, she knows everything about him. And if she would like to expose the husband to the society, she has the most complete data. So it is here that the Quran is actually requesting them that if she would like to expose her husband, she can really make a mess out of it. She can really make a case out of it. But then this is not going to be productive in any way. When you humiliate someone in public, because when you expose someone in public, you end up disparaging that person. It's not going to reform that person. So you see, when you are pushed, remember the verse occurs in a context. It says that فَالصَّالِحَاتُ قَانِتَاتٌ حَافِظَاتُ لِلْغَيْبِ, that pious women are those who are compliant to their husbands and who keep their secrets. The context is that the husband is the head of the family, and at times he might be unreasonable, and he might seem unreasonable to the wife. And this is something that might bother her or annoy her. But in the interest of the family, if she thinks that the husband is sincere in his approach, then if he is giving an opinion and she has a different opinion, and there's a deadlock and his opinion has got to prevail, the Quran says that because this is a situation in which she might get annoyed, in which she might get a little off track. So remember, if you get annoyed, if you get angered, then all sorts of things can come out of you. So the advice it gives is that on this occasion, please remain compliant. And as a result of the anger that might be built up in you, don't start exposing your husband.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Our next question asks, isn't companionship a major and substantial component of marriage and surpasses that of the honeymoon phase period or the euphoria that people have at the beginning? Aren't humans capable of developing relationships in their mature years? So why is it that there is a stigma of marriageable age standards, especially for women?
I think you're absolutely right that companionship actually overrides other things. But this stigma is something that I have no control of. I mean, this is something that the society has decided. Neither you nor I can do anything about it. The stigma that women, they must come home with a lot of dowry, and that they cannot marry anyone else unless they have a large amount of dowry, is something of it's like a social evil that has engulfed many societies in the world. So, I mean, this is like a custom that has to be done away with. And I mean, I agree with you, but the thing is that we have to start this in the society that women should be, I mean, they should be accommodated. They should be made to realize that they are coming to the home of a husband who is going to take care of them. So this is something very demeaning for the husband to ask for, let's say, furniture or things like, household amenities from the wife's family. I mean, it is below his dignity. So I think this is something which has to be collectively understood. But unfortunately, in many third world Muslim countries, this is not the case. These are age-old traditions, and these traditions, they override any intellectual approach to refine them. They think that these traditions are more powerful, they are more invasive, and they have to be followed. So, I mean, whatever you can call them, they have become such a menace that, as you can see, the data from many Muslim countries that women pass their marriageable age and they don't get married simply because they don't have sufficient funds for their dowry.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Rafia Khwaja, please go ahead. Please keep your question very concise. We only have 2 minutes left.
Dr. Shehzad, just want to know that men, even after marriage, many of them keep having affairs. Then what is the position of the wife? They can have a mistress somewhere, they can have an affair. And as you say, he's the head of the family, so she has to be compliant. Then what is her position?
I mean, if you ask me, because I do deal with a lot of such cases, I can say that just as men have affairs, women also end up, unfortunately, having affairs with other men and also end up getting divorced or asking divorce from their husbands, leaving their previous children and then marrying a new husband. So this goes on both ways. I mean, this is immoral behavior on the part of both. And whether the husband is guilty of it or the wife, it is wrong for both. And they have to realize that this marriage is basically, it's like a umbrella, which gives them shade from the sun of adultery and from other things. And if they have to do something outside of marriage, then there is always a method to that, and that you first separate from your first wife and then do whatever you do. Because if you start having extramarital relations or relations out of wedlock, then this is something that's going to destroy your marriage in any case.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Salman Aziz, please go ahead.
Sir, there was a saying by Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu that when the mother has given birth to free men, how can you enslave them? So, what was this a game changer, and was there any litigation made? And did the Muslims in the past, Rashidun Caliphate, acted upon this thing to abolish slavery?
Of course it was. But you see, at times things they don't work according to our wishes. In spite of the fact that the Caliph Umar stated these words, as has been reported in history, he tried his best that you should not enslave people who have been born free. But I mean, not all of us listen to the voice of reason. And it's not just the case with the Caliph Umar in those times. Even today, there are voices of reason all around us, but still we are engulfed deeply into some very, very, I would say, horrific traditions, even today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Bisma, please go ahead. Last question of the day.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saleem. I just wanted to say that it seems that Islam has given paramount importance to the family structure and to marriage, which is brilliant. And you've explained it brilliantly today, because I feel that the marriage structure has broken up in the West. So when you focus on the marriage structure in Islam, while we ask you all the hard questions, thank you for explaining it and for making us understand how important this structure is. Just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem, for another very fantastic session. And thanks to everybody who came through today.